Brew Strong is brought to you by morebeer.com, where a man can brew like a man.
Brewers, it's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think. Jamil and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy, hey, my brewing brothers and sisters. This is Brew Strong. This is Jamil Zainasheff, along with my co-host, John Palmer.
Howdy, everybody.
And today, a special day in Brew Strong history. We're going to have a water ganza.
Yes. All water, all the time.
Oh, yeah, this is going to be the water talk channel for the foreseeable.
Hopefully it'll answer more questions than it generates.
Well, we'll try. And if it generates more questions, that's why we have the live chat. So if you're listening live to the show, which is all the Brewing Network stuff is broadcast live, you can participate by going to the brewingnetwork.com, and there is a live chat button there. You can participate in the show. You can ask questions. You can suggest things like that, all there live during the show. And if you get a chance, visit our wonderful sponsors, More Beer and morebeer.com. They have a lot of great brewing products, great prices, and a great bunch of people there. That's where my brewing sculpture came from, is morebeer.com. I've got their 1550, and I personally love that product and love those guys. Good people there. And
wow, talk about setting up a segue. That was pretty good, Jamil.
Well, I'm not done yet.
Okay.
We actually we've got another sponsor for today's show, Clark Brewing Innovations. Visit them at clarkbrewing.com. Yeah, so like I was saying, we've got the Water Ganza today. We're going to do 3 shows back to back, all about water. And we've got John Palmer here, who knows quite a bit about this subject, and he's going to give you an education on water. Starting from square one all the way to how you would build water for a specific recipe. So what kind of sparked this was all the email questions we get, and you can email Brewstrong at thebrewingnetwork.com with show ideas and things like that. But Mason, who I've exchanged some emails with in the past, he said, Pope, I don't know if the show's already planned, but I was wondering if you could take an example recipe from Brewing Classic Styles and explain how to build a water recipe from DI water. So, he wants to, one of the things Mason was talking about was he thought his water was so horrible that he needed to be able to kind of start from scratch. And he felt if he didn't do that, he had very little chance of, replicating like the clones that we do on the Can You Brew It show. He felt that the water was so far off that it would be next to impossible. So that got John and I to thinking, well, here's a great opportunity to kind of go, maybe not just right to that point, but let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the very basics and work our way through there. And I think even if you feel like you know a lot about water and you're an advanced brewer, you still will learn a lot just kind of going over the basics, and maybe there's a few things fundamentals that John can clear up for us, and be a good thing, huh?
Yeah, well, I'll work through it and get in on the live chat if you have any particular questions that occur to you as you're going along. But hopefully all 3 of these shows we'll start out with the basics. What is water? We'll get in the second show. We'll get into more about how to adjust it. And third show will be kind of like why to adjust it and when do you do it.
Specifics for more like recipe type of questions as well, right? All right, so I'm not going to ask you to define water because Normally we start with a definition of water, but
I had a great opening monologue joke too.
15 minutes on what is water. Maybe you could kind of fill us in on. All right, I know that I need to use water when I'm brewing beer, and it's a big part of the ingredients that I add. Okay, but can you tell me, John, what is important about the water in beer? Why is this important? Why can't I just use water?
Okay. Well, it's all about flavor. I mean, we want good tasting water to get good tasting beer. You listen to beer commercials, they talk about Rocky Mountain spring water and water from a better source. We're not talking about water from Open Swim at the Y. We don't want water that's rich in chlorine and nitrates and frogs and fish eggs and stuff. We want good, clean tasting water so we can get good, clean tasting beer.
Okay, so even if you have water that's less than perfect, you can change that, right? And
right.
make better water for beer, or are you kind of stuck? Do you brew only certain styles, or?
There's a couple of levels to this. When it comes, to basic brewing water for both extract and all grain brewers, I mean, first concern is about taste. You want the water to taste good. And ways you can help it taste good are like, carbon filtration, it's such like that you can hook up to your home brewery, or you can use DI water if necessary.
Deionized.
Deionized or reverse osmosis, RO water. But, the first cut is you want good flavor. Mm-hmm. When you go deeper, no pun intended, you start looking at the mineral profiles. And a lot of people, when they change their brewing water, they're doing it for a couple of reasons. They're trying to maybe emulate a particular city in order to brew a specific style of beer. But, the bottom line is that whenever a brewer changes his brewing water, he's after better flavor in the beer. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we're going to be talking about over the course of these 3 shows is how does, changing your water potentially improve the taste of your beer if you do it right? Well,
and how is that? So people are always, Burton-on-Trent water, or, the water of Pilsen, or, people are always focused on those types of water. But how does water adjustment improve the flavor of the beer or the flavor of the water? How is it that making these changes actually improves it?
Yeah, there's a couple ways. It's kind of like compare it to cooking, Ask yourself, why when we, make dinner, we don't simply boil every food that we eat in plain water. Boiled sausage, boiled potatoes, boiled chickens. I mean, we're after and we add seasoning. We add salt to the water. We add, spices to the water, herbs. The same kind of thing carries over into brewing, where we're looking for some flavor from that water, some like salt, some minerals in the water that will enhance the flavor of the beer. Mm-hmm. And there's 2 ways that minerals and water and brewing enhance flavor. One is the minerals themselves, like sodium, chloride, sulfate. Each of these, has an effect on the flavor that we perceive from the beer. The other one is the pH, and when you adjust your water, you can adjust the pH of the water, and you can adjust the pH of the mash, and thereby the pH of the beer. And the pH of the beer, whether it's acidic or basic, drives the flavor. It drives how we as humans perceive the flavor of the beer on our tongue. If it's a little acidic, that beer gets a little bit brighter and a little bit drier. If it's a little bit basic, the beer gets a little bit more mellow, a little softer. And then if you increase, as you move out from, kind of a generally optimum pH range for beer at around, in the low 4s, As you get more acidic, that's going to become sharper. That flavor is going to become sharper. As you move more basic into the higher 4s, then that beer is going to start tasting, rounder, then duller, and then as you get really high, then it can get almost bitter tasting from a base, an alkaline sense. So pH does a lot to drive the flavor of foods and drive the flavor of beer.
Well, and when you're talking about the difference between acidic or basic water, one of the things that people might be familiar with is when you have a more basic solution, it actually gets kind of a soft, slick kind of feel. If you rub it between your fingers, you can actually feel kind of it's almost soapy in a way. And if you get a real acidic water and rub that between your fingers, it seems dry and like there's nothing there. And a lot more, like you're saying, the difference between the base and the acid balance. The same thing carries over into the beer, essentially. That's what you're saying.
Yep. Yeah, and that characteristic kind of drives how your tongue perceives the flavors that are there. And so water can have a profound effect on beer. There's one handle we have, one lever we can pull when we're manipulating water is the chloride to sulfate ratio. Chloride tends to be a malt enhancer. Kind of like salt in soup. Chloride in beer tends to make the malt taste a little rounder, a little fuller. Sulfate has an effect of kind of drying out and accentuates the hop bitterness. And so you can see in the professional literature, and they've had this for decades, where manipulation of the chloride to sulfate ratio in the water helps drive the balance of the beer, whether it's to the malty side or to the bitter side. And there's a lot of other factors, and going back to our mouthfeel show, a lot of other factors that enter into that overall perception of the mouthfeel of the beer and so on. But what we're talking about here is just kind of flavor censoring.
And you're talking about chloride, which is different than chlorine in the water, which
That's right.
you want no chlorine in your water, which you might filter out or use Camden tablets or something to get rid of the chlorine in the water. But
and chloramine too.
And chloramines. But chloride is something that you do want in your water.
Right. Yeah, you do. Chloride is great. I mean, as far as it's a seasoning. You can have too much, of course. You can make it too salty. But anywhere from I believe it's anywhere from like 0 to 250 parts per million. That whole range will add to the character of the beer to some extent.
Well, and I don't know, I think I told this story before, but if you ever drink beer with some real old son of a gun, sometimes you'll see them, they'll add salt to the beer. They'll say, this beer is kind of harsh, and so they'll want to add salt to their beer. And I think it does a couple of things. One is it drives out some of the carbonation, but it also, I think that the chlorides in there, like you're saying, will also kind of soften up the beer in some ways. And
accentuate the malt character over the hop character, or the bitterness character. Yeah, that's right.
So if you ever come across one of those old guys putting salt in their beer, you know that there is some foundation in science for something like that, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of ruins a good IPA, but but to each his own.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to be adding, you can't really subtract these minerals from the water, can you? I mean, there's no like a spoon you can work through the water and pull out these minerals. How do you? Do you just add, or is there a time when you subtract too, or how do you strike that balance? I mean, we'll get it in more details in the second show, but basically, how does that happen?
Yeah. There's the situation differs a little bit between extract and all grain brewers. Generally, in terms of extract brewing instructions, people say if your water tastes good, your beer tastes good, just brew with what you have. Don't worry about adjusting it or anything. And as a general rule, that's usually true. Where you run into trouble is where your water supply is highly alkaline, that is rather basic, has lots of bicarbonate and carbonates in it, and if you add that water to extract, malt extract, in the production of malt extract, they've already driven off the pure H2O molecules. They left all the minerals behind. So you've got kind of like a pre-mineralized extract, and if you rehydrate that with more highly alkaline water, then you're going to really start affecting the flavor profile of that beer. And it's that beer, I've tasted it many times, where you taste an extract beer that's just not bright. It's kind of dull tasting. Sometimes they can be quite harshly bitter.
Very similar to some brewers. So they're not very bright.
That's right.
Bitter.
It depends on location, depends on the recipe, and a whole bunch of factors. But that's a situation you can run into with a beer that is brewed with highly alkaline water when you're working with extract.
Well, and one thing I think we kind of touched on briefly earlier was deionized water, reverse osmosis water.
Right.
So
thank you for pulling me back on track. But when you're brewing with that kind of water, you can't wave a magic wand through it to demineralize it. What you can do though is you can dilute it with distilled water. Mm-hmm. And that will, if you dilute it 1-to-1, it effectively cuts your mineral levels in half. Or you can, and with extract brewing, you can safely brew any extract kit with deionized water or distilled water, because really the mineral profile is already in there.
Right. So one thing I think we should kind of cover is deionized and distilled and reverse osmosis. So these are really waters that have had either all of the minerals removed or the majority. In reverse osmosis, it's water's forced through a membrane, and 95% of the minerals or so are removed, depending on how effective the membrane is. So it's very close to distilled or deionized water. Deionized, they use ion exchange resins and things like that, and strip everything out, and it pretty much comes out with 0 minerals in it. And then distilled is usually steam distilled, which is they boil it, and then the water is collected from the steam. And just like when they're brewing or evaporating the malt extract, and concentrating it down, the steam being driven off, it's just pure water. All the minerals are left behind, and that's what John's referring to here with the need to reconstitute that malt extract without adding a lot of extra minerals to it. So again, distilled water, and then spring water, which a common thing a lot of people talk about. A lot of brewers are going to the store and they've been taught their whole life, spring water is really good. The fact is, different spring waters can have a lot of minerals in them, and even more than probably your tap water many times. And so you're going out and buying a water with a lot of minerals. Sometimes they'll even add minerals to these things. And, it's not necessarily the best thing for your brewing, especially if you're an extract brewer. John, it seems to me you're saying if I was at the store and I'm going to buy some water to use in my extract brewing, if I have a choice between distilled or spring water, I should probably go with the distilled unless I'm trying to do something very specific and I know what the concentration of minerals are in that spring water.
That's right. Yeah, if you know what the concentration of minerals in spring water is, and it's going to depend on the manufacturer. But if you know what they are, then you can factor that in. But if you don't know what they are, you'll be fine going with pure distilled water to rehydrate that extract brew, because all the minerals were already there.
Okay. Well, why don't we take a short break, and when we come back, we'll get into, does this really work and how?
Brew right. Brew smart. Brew strong. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, Push, the new brewery's looking good.
Thanks, Finn. Piece by piece.
Well, let's fire her up. Whoa! Is that a new kettle?
Yeah, just got it brand new, but paid half price.
What? And that blade scale?
40% off.
The new tap handle?
$5 instead of $13. Got a new regulator for the brew stand, too, but $5 instead of $25.
Dude, where are you stealing all this stuff from?
Where else? The more beer deal of the day.
Announcing the Beer, and More Beer Deal of the Day. Every day, a new fantastic deal from big items to small that will blow you away. Boil kettles, carboy carriers, sterile siphon starters, digital timers. Watch morebeer.com every day for a new deal, and you just might find the item you've been waiting for at a price you cannot believe. Hurry, because stock is limited on most items.
And that sweet Guinness cap? Let me guess. The More Beer Deal of the Day. Yeah, I knew it. Come on, let's brew something. Find the More Beer Deal of the Day at morebeer.com. Celebrity voices impersonated.
Have some of your soldiers reported casualties? Are you tired of finding out your beers never made it to the competition because of shipping damage? Do you hate the hassle of packaging your bottles for the delivery services? How about making it easier for the overworked competition organizers who have to unwrap each entry and then discard the waste? Well, now there is a solution. The competition bottle shipping system is here. Now available at www.clarkbrewing.com and at select retail shops. Field tested with numerous shipments around the world and literally dropped down a flight of stairs with 0 casualties reported to date. Designed by a homebrewer for homebrewers. Just grab the shipping box, place the bottom insert in with your bottles, and put the top insert on to lock them safely in place. You're ready to ship. Visit www.clarkbrewing.com for more details and to watch a video of the stair test. Clark Brewing Innovations, providing innovative solutions to the American homebrewer. Now just ship it.
Homebrewers, listen up. Have you seen Mike McDole's picture on that sweet Sam Adams six-pack? Well, it's your turn. Did you know that 2 prior long shot winners have gone on to become professional brewers themselves? It's time to enter this year's Samuel Adams Long Shot American Homebrew Contest. Jim Cook first brewed Samuel Adams Boston Lager in his kitchen using a 100-year-old recipe from his great-great-grandfather. This is your chance to have your handcrafted homebrew recipe distributed all across America. Be the next homebrewer on the Sam Adams Long Shot 6-pack. This year's contest is going on right now, and you should be a part of it. Time is running out, though. All entries must be received between April 15th and May 1st. Go to samadams.com for all the details and to register your entry, which, by the way, is free. The Samuel Adams Long Shot American Homebrew Contest. Giving back to where it all began. Enter today.
Live. Beer Radio. The Brewing Network. The Brewcasters.
If you're just starting, don't be discouraged by all this stuff. It's so easy.
Just throw it together.
Put some sugar and some water and some yeast in there.
Yeah.
It's beer.
Brewing Network.
Back to your hosts, Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. Putting the testicles in technical. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're in the middle of our waterganza. And we've been talking about the fundamentals of water and why you'd want to make changes. And here's a question for you, John. So, how well does this water adjustment thing really work? I mean, how big a difference is it going to it be from me just having, whatever my current tap water is to, going through all the trouble of calculating what I need and maybe buying some water and some minerals and making some gram accurate measurements and all that? How big a difference could I expect?
Well, it makes a pretty big difference. I've been looking at this for 10 years now, and I think it makes the difference between scores in the 30s and scores in the 40s during competitions.
Is that in every style, or is it more towards one style of beer than another, or one type of brewing versus another? Is it more important in all grain brewing than it is in extract brewing? Yeah,
it's more important in all grain than extract, but it really it blankets the whole spectrum. Again, you can make the argument that it's more important for the extreme styles like Pilsner and very dark beers such as robust porters and double box and various extreme styles where you're looking for a really particular character. It's not quite so important for pale ales and brown ales and amber ales and so on, where you can be kind of middle of the road stuff. But I'll repeat, I think it makes a difference between the scores in the 30s and the scores in the 40s when you judge any beer of any style in competition. Mm-hmm. And just a couple examples. Last year, I judged the light lager category at National, and there was a bunch of light American lagers, standard American lagers, Dortmunder, Munich Helles in that category, and it was one of those situations where the first beer in the flight, if it's a good one, you kind of hold back. You're saying, okay, that beer tastes really good, but we got a lot of other beers in this flight coming up. Kind of not say this one's the best right away. It's a good beer, and we'll move on. As we tasted the rest of the beers in that flight, that first beer kept standing out, and that was a light American lager. It had a light malt profile, but a clean and bright malt profile. It was 2-row only, no heavy flavors in there, but that flavor was bright. And as we went through the entire rest of the flight and all the other beers, we kept going back to that one. And that beer, brewed by Graham Cox, ended up winning the category.
Now, you sure that wasn't just your love of like Keystone Light that caused that to be the case?
No, and I'm happy to say it wasn't. I talked with him afterwards, and I said, "Did you do water adjustment on that beer?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I've been reading your book, and I brewed that with distilled and added some salts and gypsum and calcium chloride, and that's what helped punch up that character." There are a lot of good beers in that category. I think we had like 9 or more in that category, but that one from a light, standard American lager, that one really stood out. The year before, in the same category, Kristen England took first place with a Munich Helles. And again, a Munich Helles is kind of a softer beer, soft, sweet malt profile, and it's, in the same category with some Dortmunder Export and the others, where you might expect judges to get a little bit swayed by a little fuller tasting, a little more robust tasting beer later in the flight or wherever it happened to fall in the flight. But again, Kristen's a guy that knows water. He's written the water section for the BJCP tests and talked about water several times in the past. And he brewed that and made that Munich Helles stand above the rest of the beers in the category.
Well, and I'd say this, that, the simpler the recipe, the more important, in my view of things, the more important your process and your water is, because you look at it this way. Now, the only way to brew something like a Munich Helles or any kind of Pilsner, any of the lighter Pilsners, the American light lagers, or you can add corn or rice or something like that. But the basic difference tends to be the process and the water, because your ingredients, if it's all Pilsner malt and some hops, pretty much everybody else who's brewing that beer is doing all Pilsner malt and some hops. So you can do different hops, and but your process really shines. That's why a lot of times you'll hear other brewers talking about how difficult it is to brew an American light lager. How tricky a style that is, because there's no room to hide the flaws and all that. Well, I'd say a lot of people are able to overcome the flaws and get past the flaws, and they're not really having flaws in their brewing technique, but they may need to tweak the water, things like that, and that's where the difference is going to be. That's where those few points that make somebody a winner versus just part of the pack of really well brewed beers, but not a standout. And I think that's what you're getting at, huh, John?
Yep, I agree. That is the point.
Okay, so one concern I always have when people start talking water adjustments, and I've been pretty passionate about this point, is if you don't know what you're doing, don't screw with the water. It's one of the last things to start to adjust. Try and figure out everything else, and get the basics of fermentation down, and all that stuff down before you go mucking about with the water, especially if you don't know what you're doing, because it's possible to make your beer worse, isn't it, with an improper water adjustment?
Most definitely.
Can it cause problems?
It again goes back to just like cooking. Too much salt will spoil it. If one time I added. I had a spaghetti sauce that was family was due to arrive home really soon, and I was trying to make dinner. Spaghetti sauce, for whatever reason, was just too acidic. And I thought, well, I'll add some baking soda. That's, alkaline. It should tone down the acidity of the sauce a little bit. I added, half teaspoon or a teaspoon of baking soda to the sauce, and it changed everything. It was wretched. There was no tomato sharpness. It was like eating a spoonful of tomato paste. There was just no acidity to it at all. And when they got home, I said, "Hey, we're going out." It ruined it. And you can easily do the same thing by adding too much gypsum. You can add too much bicarbonate or chalk to your water real easily and ruin it.
Well, and I was going to say the same thing. I make tomato sauce, make my spaghetti sauce that the family really loves, and the source ingredients change through the seasons and time to time, and sometimes your source ingredients it results in a much more acidic sauce, and you need to kind of and usually, as far as I know, most cooks use for adjusting the acidity and their the apparent acidity in their spaghetti sauce is some sugar, and the sugar is really doesn't affect the acid levels, but just kind of sweetens it up a little bit to kind of mask those. Versus actually getting rid of some of the acidity, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and I've overdone it with the sugar sometimes. Where you end up feeling like, this is really sweet. What'd you do? Well, you got to be careful on those adjustments, because you can just as easily or easier than making it better, you can make it worse. Right?
That's right.
So it's important to understand what you're doing when you're making an adjustment. Now, if you just want to play around and throw in a teaspoon of gypsum and see what kind of difference it makes, side by side on a couple of beers, that's all fine. But I think what John's trying to do is teach everyone to really understand what you're doing and why you do it and how to go about it. So now, you kind of touched on this earlier, but what specifically is it in the water that we need to adjust? We're not adjusting hydrogen and oxygen molecules. We're adjusting, what is it? What's the minerals, the salts that we are adjusting?
Right. It's there's calcium and magnesium, which are your hardness minerals. people often talk about, my water is really hard or my water is soft. Well, it's the what we call the cations, or the positive metal ions, that are your water hardness ions. And principally in water, that is calcium and magnesium, and mostly calcium. Magnesium typically exists at about 1/3 to 1/4 of the concentration of calcium. The other ions that you get are sodium and chloride, sulfate, and then the big alkalinity ion is bicarbonate, or the carbonate family. Now, carbon dioxide, in the atmosphere, diffuses into water, forms carbonic acid. When that, depending on the pH, that will either exist as carbonic acid or bicarbonate, which is HCO3, or carbonate, which is CO3. And different forms and different ratios of the three forms of the carbonates will be predominant at different pHs.
And this is like a temporary hardness, right? Something that yeah, you can talk about it that way. I think if you get wrapped up in temporary versus permanent hardness, you're gonna kind of get a little sidetracked. Okay. So, well, because when you boil the water, it changes the pH. It drops out some salts, and affects it that way. And one thing you were mentioning just a moment ago was, the carbon dioxide in the air. It's actually dissolves into the water, and this is you're not saying that it's carbonated water like bubbles coming out of it, but whatever gases are in the air do dissolve into the water, and that's in there. And this is producing some of this bicarbonate and other forms of the carbonic acid and things like that, right?
Yeah, I think everybody's heard that pure water has a pH of 7. Pure distilled water has a pH of 7, right neutral on the pH scale. The pH scale, just to refresh everybody, is 0 to 7 is acidic, and 7 to 14 is basic or alkaline. And pure water, distilled water, has a pH of 7. Well, you think, okay, where can I get distilled water? Well, rainwater. Rain condenses in the atmosphere, falls down, pure, that hasn't gone through any minerals with anything. But the pH of rainwater is 5, and it's due to the carbon dioxide that it picks up from the air, forms that carbonic acid. Now, and when you let distilled water sit around, expose the air for any length of time, or after a few weeks, let's say, the pH changes away from 7, and they can either, depending on the environment, it can either drift acidic or basic. But there's the carbonate species are the big driver in terms of brewing chemistry. You have your water hardness and you have your water alkalinity. And as you were saying, Jamil, you have people refer to permanent hardness and temporary hardness. Temporary hardness is the hardness, is when you boil the water and you get chalk precipitating out onto the sides of the pot. That's calcium carbonate and magnesium carbonate, and due to the action of boiling and the incorporation of additional oxygen from the atmosphere during the boil, rolling through, you can get these precipitation reactions going on, and you precipitate out a certain percentage of your calcium and magnesium, and that is referred to as temporary hardness. You will still have left behind like a 1 equivalent worth of calcium, and that is referred to as permanent hardness. And that permanent hardness, the calcium and magnesium, are typically associated with sulfate. Sulfate doesn't precipitate out, and so you can, again, I think this can kind of get you off on the wrong track, but you can talk about permanent hardness being the coordination of calcium and magnesium with sulfate. But I think it really isn't that germane to brewing. What you're concerned about is the total water hardness that you have in your brewing water versus the total alkalinity. And we can talk about minerals and ions like calcium, magnesium, chloride, and sodium, and bicarbonate, but it's not until you put them together and put them together with respect to a malt bill that the true picture emerges. And that picture is called residual alkalinity. What happens is you have the water hardness balancing against the water alkalinity and the natural acidity and buffering capacity of the malts that you're using, the particular grain bill that you're using. All of those three factors come together. It's like balancing a triangle. Those three things determine your mash pH,
right?
And drives the beer pH and everything else down the line.
So you really can't do, if somebody says, John, tell me how to adjust my water, for the next time I brew, you're going to say, well, what are you brewing? What's the grain bill? What are you planning on brewing? Because without that information, you're missing part of that triangle. You're missing a big component of how the water is going to be affected by the grains that you're adding.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a good analogy earlier to help people get this, but you can talk about your ions and your minerals and the water profile from a classic brewing city. But, that's like talking about guns and ammunition or talking about the players. It's not until you combine those with, somebody directing the fight, somebody directing the war, that you put everything together, because you may win a few battles here and there by adjusting your water, but until you understand how it all comes together and understand what residual alkalinity means, you're not going to win the war. You're not going to have a complete understanding of what is going on. And that's what I try to talk about when people ask me about water. You got to think of that triangle. You've got to think of your water, the water you're brewing with, its hardness, its alkalinity, and the malt bill that you're working with, because that's going to drive the eventual pH of the beer. It's going to drive the eventual mineral profile of the beer and the final flavor of that beer.
Okay, I got a better one for you. All right, so it's kind of like, if somebody said, well, what's the best car for a combination of engine and, chassis for a race? And, you could say, well, you could talk about all sorts of different kinds of engines and chassis for a race and suspension and things like that. But until you know what track you're going to run on, what kind of race you're going to run, is it off-road race? Is it you running the Baja or you running the Indy 500? It's two totally different types of cars. And so you're going to need a different kind of engine, different kind of chassis in order to do that. And brewing's the same sort of thing as far as the water and the your hardness and your alkalinity and your grain bill are all play together. And without knowing all three of them, you're going to be in trouble. So let's take a short break, and when we get back, what we'll do is get a little more in depth into these components of water and answer some live listener questions. Back after this.
Keep your carboy cap on.
This is Brew Strong.
We'll be right back.
Williams Brewing is your online resource for prompt delivery of quality home brewing supplies. Since 1979, Williams Brewing has offered the finest equipment and freshest ingredients and the best customer service in the business. Cut hours off your brewing sessions by using one of their 11 varieties of famous Williams malt extract. Their Williams German Pils is mashed with pure German Moravian 2-row barley malt for a light blonde color and malty crispness you just can't get from other extracts. Or check out their unique fermenters, draft beer beer equipment, bottling aids, and more. They even have their own line of precision hydrometers. Go to WilliamsBrewing.com to browse their vast selection and enter promo code BREW at the order checkout for $5 off your next order over $50. Orders placed by 3 p.m. ship the same day. Again, go to WilliamsBrewing.com and enter promo code BREW at checkout for $5 off your next order. Brewing is easy, the Williams way.
Nico, listen, our lawyers said that we had to do this for 1 hour, and after this, we don't have to talk to each other for 3 more months to the next meeting.
Kids, come on, let's get out of here.
I'm supposed to have more lines. I'm the professional. Hey, it's Sully.
And I'm Nico.
And we opened the 21st Amendment 9 years ago at 563 2nd Street in San Francisco, just 2 blocks from Giants Park, to make great beer and have a great time doing it.
That's right, because to us, the 21st Amendment is more than just the right to make beer. It's the right to experiment, to be innovative, and just do things differently. And so now, we're putting our craft beer in cans.
That's right, cans. You can find our world-famous Hell or High Watermelon Wheat Beer and Brew Free or Die IPA throughout California and Alaska.
And now it's also available on draft at select accounts in the Bay Area.
So next time you're at your local neighborhood pub or good beer store, be sure to ask for 21st Amendment in cans.
Because everyone likes it in a can.
Tasty crack cans.
Tasty crack can.
Hey, what are you doing, man?
Writing a review of WLP 400.
What? You're reviewing yeast?
Yeah. White Labs has home brewer reviews of all their strains. Are you new to these interwebs? Check it out.
That's awesome.
White Labs, your source for great yeast, invites all brewers to visit whitelabs.com to read and write your own reviews of all their yeast strains. Get real-world tips and tricks from other brewers who have made the most of their vials and post your own experiences. It's another way White Labs brings you closer to the best yeast on the planet.
And send. There you go.
You misspelled flocculate, dude.
What?
White Labs. It's all in the vial.
Downtown Joe's, located in the historic Oberon building in beautiful downtown Napa, California, offers an award-winning brew pub experience from 8:30 a.m. to 1 a.m. every day. For 15 years at the corner of 2nd and Main, Downtown Joe's has been voted Best Night Spot 7 times and Best Brew Pub for the last 4 years in a row. Brewmaster Colin Kaminsky's handcrafted ales, like his Tail Wagon Amber Ale and Catherine the Great Imperial Stout, are the perfect accent to riverside dining, live music, and a relaxing outdoor patio. Don't miss the Beer of the Month, special rotating taps, and happy hour all day Mondays. Visit downtownjoes.com to make reservations, peruse their extensive calendar of events, or just read more about their fantastic beers. Come enjoy the fine beer, food, and music. Downtown Joe's, the award-winning brew pub where you'll feel at home.
Hilo, what's it feel like?
Take awesome and multiply it by 2.
Yeah!
Spraying live beer radio all over your face.
Can't get any better than this, baby!
It's the Brewing Network.
Back to the 2 guys that know how to turn beer into beer. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. Part of our water ganza. I don't know why that sounds kind of rude, you know.
That's kind of like ginormous in the Monsters vs. Aliens movie.
I saw that with the kids last night. I like the part where
this weekend too.
The giant snail is slowly attacking Paris. I don't know why, but that slowly part really got to me. All right, so in the can you give us some general rules on maybe ratios of alkalinity to hardness for a given style or a given recipe, or maybe chloride to sulfate, or any of those sorts of ratios? Just give us we're going to really dig into this into the next show, but give us a taste, kind of where we should stand, or what should we be thinking.
There's different looking at the different components like calcium. Let's start with calcium, because calcium is an important brewing ion. It takes part in a lot of during the brewing and fermentation process. It affects yeast health, yeast flocculation. It affects beer clarity. It affects mash pH. Generally, scientists recommend about at least 50 parts per million of calcium in the wort, or in the brew. 50 minimum. 100 is good. If you get over 150, you're probably going to start swinging the pH too much, depending on the style of beer you're brewing. All this is a lot of the world's brewing literature is targeted towards pale lagers, because that's 90% of the beer that's brewed in the world is pale lager. So you always got to take information you read with a grain of salt and understand what the context is. But let's start off with saying that 50 to 150 ppm of calcium is a good place to be when you're talking about brewing water. Magnesium is important. It's important for yeast health. It's important enzyme cofactor. But in terms of the yeast, they will really get all they need from the malt itself. Magnesium's going to come out into solution from the malt during the mash. So even if your water has only like 10 parts per million of magnesium or something, the yeast will get what they need from the wort itself. So that's not too important, but it's something to at least be aware of, because it does it plays a part in the whole water hardness situation. Bicarbonate, you can draw lines for alkalinity or bicarbonate concentration. 0 to 50 ppm for your pale beers, 50 to 150 ppm for your pale ales, your copper colored on up into your brown beers. 50 to 150 you can usually work with, throughout that range of color. When you get over 150 ppm to like 250, maybe even up to 300, there you're talking about your dark beers, your American brown ale, brown porter, robust porter, double bock, stouts, Russian imperial stout, the really dark stuff. I don't recommend going above 300 parts per million alkalinity, because the buffering capacity of malts will only take you so far. You get into the really dark malts, even if you have even if you have a really dark beer, too much alkalinity is going to overwhelm the buffering capacity of that malt, and it'll throw the pH of the beer off. So probably 0 to 250 is your typical range of bicarbonate that you're looking for. And on that note, let me touch on reading a water report. To find out about your water, you need to call up your city, get a copy of the annual water report, and look for these ions: calcium, magnesium, bicarbonate, sulfate, sodium, and chloride. A lot of times you won't see bicarbonate listed. You'll see total alkalinity as calcium carbonate, and that's fine. That number will work just fine when it comes to understanding how much alkalinity you have, because as that quantity, total alkalinity, it doesn't really matter what the water pH is. You know how much alkalinity the water has. There's a ratio for calculating or between the two, converting between the two, bicarbonate to total alkalinity. And you can read about that in the book and so on. Sulfate's another one you want to look at your water report for. For normal beers, you're typically looking at, you're typically looking at something like 50 to 150 parts per million for most more normally bitter beers. If you're looking to an American Pale Ale or an IPA, that's when you start talking about 150 to say 350 parts per million. That sulfate is going to really accentuate the hot bitterness and kind of help dry out the palate. Sodium and chloride, you're talking 0 to 150 parts per million, or maybe 250 parts per million for chloride. The sodium gets talked about a lot in older brewing books and in the brewing literature, but as I've read more and more, I don't find much real use of sodium. In other words, I don't recommend adding sodium for its own sake to a beer. It seems to be kind of just coming along for the ride in terms of if you're using baking soda or table salt to influence the mineral character, the chloride level of the beer. Chloride is definitely useful in terms of, to round out the malt character, but sodium not so much. But it's good to be aware of it and look for it on your water analysis report. The chloride to sulfate ratio is just that. You're looking at the balance of the two. If the sulfate dominates, is higher than the chloride, then that beer is going to be balanced towards the bitter. If the chloride's higher, then it's going to be balanced toward the malty. And I've kind of drawn, you can say like a ratio of 0, from 0 to a half chloride to sulfate is going to be a very, sulfate dominant or very bitter beer. A half to 3/4 is going to be kind of moderately bitter. Somewhere between 3/4 and 1 1/4, kind of bounding the, the 1-to-1 area is going to be relatively balanced. When you get above 1 1/4 to 1 1/2, that's going to be malty, and anything 1 1/2 to ratio 2 is going to be very malty. So it's all chloride to sulfate ratio is all arm waving. So that's how those players work.
Okay, and we'll get into actually how to do this in the next segment, which our next show. If you're listening live, you're going to get that right now. If you're listening to the podcast, then you're going to have to wait 2 weeks to get the next segment. So let's get a couple of questions in from the chat. Justin?
Yeah, a couple of good ones. Here's a good question about, is rainwater consistent from town to town? Is that something that changes?
No, it's going to be inconsistent.
Okay.
You can have acid rain and you can have clean rain. So it'll vary depending on where you live.
Also, even there's dust and stuff that comes over from like China, and all that will get stripped out and can be dissolved as well, depending on the acidity of the water.
All right, and then a couple of pH questions. Can a lower pH affect efficiency in mash?
Yes, it can.
Okay.
If the mash gets too acidic, and by too acidic I mean down in the 4s, 4.5 roughly, mash pH wise, then your beta amylase will be quite inhibited, and your the fermentability and the conversion of the mash will suffer.
Okay, and then the other pH question, just what do you guys think about the pH, the 5.2 pH buffer, from 5-Star Products?
Most of the time it works.
Okay. And if I can sneak this last one in, someone said, hey, isn't a lot of magnesium in water, doesn't that give you the shits? That was an important question.
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
Phillips milk of magnesia, that's what its sole purpose is, to load you up with magnesium.
All right, guys, that's all from the chat.
Okay, great. So I think this is a good education on why you would want to do some water adjustments, how it can improve your beer or how it could hurt your beer if you don't know what exactly you're doing, and some of the components to water. So it's not just simply water in the beer, but water and all its constituent mineral salts and things like that, and that's going to affect your beer one way or another. So what we're going to do is we're wrapping up this show. Thanks again to our sponsors, morebeer.com and clarkbrewing.com. Make sure to visit them and check out their products. And we'll be back to continue the Water Ganza. We got 2 more full shows of water information from our resident expert, John Palmer. Until then, brew strong.
Brew strong, everybody.